Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Inside Teen Hour. It is Monday, it's 2 p.m., and it's time for us to talk about issues related to teen mental health. That's what we do here on the Inside Teen Hour every Monday at 2 p.m. My name is Frederik. I'm the owner of Insight Treatment Programs out here in Santa Clarita. We have an intensive outpatient program, PHP and IOP program out here. And we support teens and families when the teens are struggling with mental health or drug and alcohol issues. So this Monday, I have the pleasure of having an alumni parent here in the studio today. And I'm very excited about that because I think it's so important that parents who have gone through some of these struggles are able to sort of support other parents that are maybe just starting the process or are considering whether, they need to do something about what's happening at home. So peer support is, from our perspective, not just important when it's from kids to other kids, but it's also crucially important for parents to meet and to hear other parents talk about their journey. So today in the studio, I got Amber here. Welcome to the studio, Amber.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So Amber was and her family was with us back in 2021 and 22 with her son, who is, I think, around 15 at the time when he came to our program. And Amber has sort of said yes to come in here because she wants to talk a little bit about some of the things that she went through as a family. Inside Treatment we're very big on the idea that we can't just be a place that are only dealing with the teenagers. If we have to help the teenagers, we usually have to help and support the entire family, because many people, or many parents, I should rather say, sometimes forget how much hard work that they have to do, how much personal development they have to do sometimes to be able to create an opportunity for the kids to do better and do different. So, well, Amber, why don't we start with you telling me a little bit about sort of, how was your relationship with Brandon, with your teen, back in the days? What's sort of your story?
So yeah, my stepson came into my life when he was 9 years old. I started dating his dad, and his dad right away let me know, I have a spirited child at home. Me not knowing anything about mental illness, it's just not something we talked about with my family at all.
No.
Or mental health, for that matter. So I was of the opinion that, I'm good with kids. I got this.
Of course. I can handle this.
No problem.
Throw it at me.
Yeah. And when I first met Brendan, I could see he was kind of just in a general state of, agitation. You could tell he wasn't a happy-go-lucky, running around kid all the time. And I do know when he was younger, he was diagnosed with not Asperger's, but
he was maybe autistic or
autistic,
on the spectrum.
Yes, exactly, on the spectrum, but very high functioning. Mm-hmm. So he is so incredibly smart. I could talk the whole show about that, but I won't.
He is.
Yeah.
I can confirm that one.
Yeah. So eventually, his dad and I moved in together. And I was still of the opinion that what Brendan needed was some serious discipline. Mm-hmm. And again, the way that I grew up in my environment was you were either a good kid or you were a bad kid. There was no in between or reasoning for not acting how you should. And so I, not knowing anything about parenting or mental health, just kind of carried that on, my dad's discipline style. Mm-hmm. And when it didn't work, I just tried that harder, know, and we were really struggling, just butting heads, not getting along, screaming. It really got really rough sometimes. And so...
And that was probably that's the conflict was probably not just between you and Brandon, it was probably also between you and Patrick. I remember sometimes parents have different cultures, right? They come from different experiences in life.
Yes.
And therefore they bring different parenting styles into the relationship, and that can clash sometimes when problems starts arising. Yeah,
so for our son, his mom lived out of the state for a bit of his young life. So Pat openly says, I kind of didn't want to be the disciplinarian because I felt like I really had to balance both.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a ton of sense, But then in the end, we were arguing so much because I was at a point then like, well, okay, that period is over now. His mom moved back. And this kid needs some ground rules. But yeah, we really got into a lot of arguments, and then at some point I really started to feel bad for him because he was explaining how awful it is to be in the middle of between your wife and your son, right? So when I first met him, he was in an elementary school that was like putting them in holds, like physical holds and things like that. So what we did, we got him into a different school, and then homework became like the devil in our house. So it was, the pulling teeth probably would have been easier, I think. And I was still in my like drill sergeant mode, like you're going to sit here and with this pencil until this is done, And looking back, I just thought, he just didn't feel like doing it. And I don't want to feel bad about those things because we've come a long way. But I will say, looking back, it's like, man, he just couldn't. Like, he didn't have it in him at that moment. And that's the kind of thing that this journey, has really opened my eyes anyway. And yeah, it's not just that these kids want to misbehave. It's that they really, really can't get past something in their mind. And if you think it's frustrating for you as a parent, just imagine how it is for them.
That's true. Often the emotional world just gets in the way to a point, it doesn't necessarily have to be the autistic diagnosis, right? But it could also be that. But just the emotional world gets in their way sometimes to make healthy choices or do the right thing in the moment, even though they wish that they would make other choices, right?
Definitely. He does have like a strong remorse, when he does something, or when he used to do something kind of horrific, immediately he's like, I don't know why I did that. It's he doesn't want to act that way.
No.
It can be really tough, yeah. So, homework was actually the catalyst that brought us to Insight in a roundabout way. We were having one of our epic arguments. And in the past, when Brendan just lived with his dad, he would kind of, in order to make things stop when he was really overwhelmed and didn't know what else to do, he would say, I'm going to kill myself. And obviously that's not something you throw around or anything like that. So when he moved into our house, I sat him down and said, listen, this kind of comment is going to be taken very seriously. And if I hear it out of your mouth, I'm going to call the police. So, again, epic argument over homework one day, and he just starts, like, screaming, I'm going to kill myself. And never had he ever said it in front of me. So I sat down with him, and I said, Brendan, if you're serious, I'm going to call for help. And he's like, I would rather be in the hospital than feeling how I'm feeling. And so we did. I mean, really one of the hardest things ever to call the police on your child. But it was so necessary.
Yeah. That's the way to keep them safe sometimes, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's awful. It's like a terrible, terrible feeling. But yeah, I mean.
And he was 15 at the time, at this time, is that right?
He might have been right at the end of 14 or 15, yeah.
Got it. And then typically with that experience comes, the police comes or he goes to the ER. They then have to transfer him to another hospital. They put him on a hold. It's sort of a pretty tough process to go through, wouldn't you say? Or...
I have to say I give a lot of credit to the Santa Clarita Sheriff's Department because the way they responded was pretty amazing.
Great. Tell us some more about that, because I think there's a lot of people out there who would be very scared of making that call.
I'm sure. We were scared, and I have nothing to fear. So... no, they came not just with, patrol officers knocking on the door. They came with counselors. And they had a man who basically sits kids down when they're thinking about committing suicide and speaks to them to kind of gauge how serious they are. Like, have you made plans, etc. So he is a big burly guy, and I would be scared to lie to him, but he was so gentle and kind, And then they also sent a social worker, which, I mean, for a mental health call, that should be the norm, right?
Yeah, but it's not everywhere, it's good that Santa Clarita has that.
And it was very refreshing, and it's actually how we ended up getting help. They interviewed him extensively. They interviewed us. They determined he wasn't a danger to himself or anyone else. But we definitely needed to get him in some sort of treatment and get him some help right away. So.
And was that when you started at Insight, or?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Because, then tell me a little bit about, so before he said these things at home, typically what we see is that the kids will start isolating. They might start showing that they've got problems relating to other kids. They feel deep down inside, right, that they're broken, that there's something wrong with them. They have low self-esteem, and they're scared that the world around them will get to know who they really are and what really goes on inside of them. So did you see some of that stuff with Brendan before he went to the hospital, or before he was?
I think we saw all of that.
Okay.
Honestly.
Yeah.
He was very isolated. He, had a hard time making friends, and, he just didn't want to be out in the world. It was like a big, scary place, so he was doing a lot of online gaming and stuff like that, but as far as like making real human connections, he was having a really hard time, and that left him feeling obviously very, very isolated and lonely. Yeah.
What were your thoughts around sort of, okay, we need to take this to the next step, right? As a family, we need to do something. We can't continue this. But what were your thoughts around treatment? No, that's let me do it this way. There's a lot of parents who feel, treatment, that's not for us. We can't be at that point, really. Like, this can't be true. I mean, I'm a good dad. I'm a good mom. I should know how to handle this. I shouldn't have to be in an intensive outpatient program. What were your families, you and Patrick's, thoughts around that when these things started becoming recommended to you?
Yeah, I mean, once the cops leave and everything settles down, right, you're kind of like, okay, everybody takes a moment, and then you think, like, is it really this serious? But for us, our main thing was we just watched him hurt so much, and we realized as much as we want to help, we just don't have the capability. I'm not a therapist. I'm not even a regular mom, right? I'm a stepmom.
Yeah.
So, what we told him was, Bren, you need help that we can't give you. It's not like, we didn't really talk about it like treatment or, like a big thing like that. It was just help in our house, and it doesn't have to be like a taboo thing. I mean, it's your kid,
True.
And everything else kind of goes out the window. So once I kind of found out what the program entailed, I was a little intimidated as a parent.
Makes sense.
But you got to put in the work. I mean, I think that one of the biggest changes that we experienced was because I said, I'm not right all the time. And I had to really swallow my pride and admit that, I'm not doing everything right. It's not this kid's fault, and there was a lot that comes out, and it just hits you as a parent. You're thinking, like I always famously used to say in parent group, I drug him in there by his ear, like, here, you need to fix this.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then I learned that myself would be attending.
Exactly.
And it turned out I had quite a bit to fix myself.
Of course.
So,
or a bit to explore at least,
exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're hitting an important point, right, Amy, that this whole idea of, hey, look, a treatment program is not just a place where you go and the teen is getting some support and it's getting fixed, as you said, right?
Right.
It's really a place where there needs to be an environment and there needs to be focus on, hey, this is something everybody needs to be part of, and it can't just be, hey, my teen is acting out, my teen is being defiant, my teen is having problems. Here you go. We all need to do a little bit of fixing in this process, right?
Yeah, I mean, it takes everybody. So, maybe your teen does have a lot of work to do, but it could be just some small things that you could change that could make your environment so much more stable. So just not what you tell them, the way you tell them something, and I was that parent that was like, well, you're going to do what I say no matter how I say it because I told you to.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know what? It just doesn't work sometimes.
No, not for everybody.
It's not for everyone.
Right? I can't stress enough that everybody has their journey, right, and their experiences. And of course, for some parents, it is important that a treatment program helps them to set boundaries and helps them to hold their boundaries. Like, that could also be a big part of the process, right? It doesn't always have to be, oh no, we need to be less restrictive, or oh no, we need to be less this or that.
No.
It is, it all depends on the family.
Yeah, I mean, one big thing that we felt was kind of like we had insight on our side, right? So if we're at home, enforcing a chore now, it's because, well, this is what we agreed at Insight.
True, blame it on Insight. I like
exactly.
it, right?
It worked like a charm, you know?
Good.
But it really helped. It kind of takes some of the burden off of you as a parent, but it helps you enforce these things that you've agreed to.
Yeah, some of these rules, right, that you need to have in place, some of these boundaries.
Definitely.
I would love to talk more about that, but before we go there, I just want to ask, in the beginning, was Brendan, was he okay with starting treatment? Because a lot of kids that start treatment, they don't really want treatment. They want to just stay at home, isolate in their room. They don't want to do anything treatment related, right? What was Brandon's approach at that time?
His approach was, I am absolutely not going.
Okay, I like it. So that's normal. Let's just clarify that for the listener out there. That's pretty normal, right? Usually the kids are at a point when they start treatment where they feel that they've tried it all. They've tried to see a therapist, that didn't work. They've tried to talk to mom and dad, that didn't work. They've tried to do well in school, that didn't work. They've tried to take a medication, that didn't work.
Yes.
They've tried it all, and they get to a point where they're like, Frederik, just leave me the heck alone and let me do my own thing.
Yep.
And let me isolate, or let me smoke my weed, or let me do whatever I need to do to get through the day.
Right.
Because that's the only thing that works. Everything else just cause more pain and more struggles. So leave me alone, right?
Yes.
That's the usual sort of approach.
I mean, that's basically exactly where we were at. It was a struggle to get him to go, and then you think you hit like a lull and everything's going along fine, and then one day, he comes home and this isn't working, I'm not going anywhere, and you're like, okay, I got it now. This is another bump, but he's going to get over it.
Yeah, true.
But,
got to be consistent, right?
It's like when you feel sick, right? Like you just want a blanket and your comfy couch and you don't want to go anywhere because you feel awful. And
that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Amber, we need to go in and take a little break now. But when we come back, we're going to talk more about, how do you actually talk to your teen about going, and how do you hold these boundaries, and some of the guilt and struggles that comes with all that.
For sure.
But you're listening to KHTS 98.1 FM, and this is the Insight Teen Hour. So you're listening to the Insight Teen Hour, and this is at KHTS 98.1 FM. It's Monday, it's around 2:30, and today in the studio I got Amber, who is an alumni parent here from our program. She's here to talk a little bit about, her experience with having a teen that's struggling, and how she was able to get through program and, turn these things around as a parent. Some of the struggles and some of the things she had to learn as part of treatment. So, Amber, we were talking about that. You made the decision of Brandon coming to a treatment program, coming to Insight in this case, and obviously, like most other teens, he was defined. He did not want to go. How did you talk to him about going? Like, how did you get through that phase when the team did not want to participate or show up? Yeah,
so I mean, I think once we got the message through to him that we just really wanted to help him, he kind of recognized he was at a little bit of rock bottom. You know, he was like, I couldn't possibly feel worse. But still, he didn't want to go, but he agreed to go. And so, you know, once you get there, it's, it's a super welcoming environment, but it's still scary. You know, it doesn't matter because you're here to like bare your soul, right?
Yes.
So,
that's right, Amber.
Yeah, it could be definitely frightening, and then especially that it's your peers. You know, it's not just like some random age group,
no
older people yelling at you, whatever, right? It's your peers. And so it was for him very intimidating for weeks. You know, he had a struggle. But through that, you know, you could see little breakthroughs. And so, you know, one day he would come home and say, oh, you know, I had a really good chat with so-and-so today. And, you know, we helped each other. And so I think once you kind of establish those relationships, you know, you get a little bit of that trust. You know that, you know, these people are in a similar situation as you, and maybe you're in a room full of people in a similar situation as you for the first time in your life.
Correct.
Because you've never, you know, addressed this before. Then it starts to be like, okay, I'll go, you know, and then not to get too far ahead, but then eventually he was going on days that he didn't have to be there. You know, he had a drop down. He's like, I still want to go. So the journey, you know, it's like really hard in the beginning. It's like pulling a cart up a hill. But then once you get there, you know, it's not all downhill, but it's definitely easier. Yeah.
And I always tell parents, you really have to communicate to your teen that, look, this is not just for you. This is not just you being a bad kid and you need to be in treatment now because of some poor choices or whatever. But it's about us as a family. We need some help. Dad and I or mom and I need to learn some things and understand some things and get a different perspective. You, of course, also needs to learn some things. But it's really a family thing right now, guys, or Brandon. And I feel usually kids tend to sort of accept that in a certain way. But if you always have that approach, look, you've made some poor choices. You've done this. You've done that. Look, you've been at the hospital. You've been self-harming. You have to understand. You need to be in treatment. You need to go. That doesn't get a long way. If you can turn it around and say, look, we understand that whatever you're struggling with is so big that we can't handle it without mom and dad loves you and we care for you and we need the best for you. And therefore, we all have to go and participate in this program.
Definitely, yeah. It's very hard to like. Well, for me, I'll just speak for me. For me, it was very hard to look inside myself because, like I said, I brought him in there. Somebody needs to fix this, you know. And he was the one who brought it up with his therapist that, you know, he and I had the most to work on. And so we did. And again, I had to admit things about myself that I don't like and I don't want to see. But ultimately, I think how we were successful is because we stayed dedicated to what's best for Brendan, what's best for our family, right? So it gets hard for sure. But if you can just stay true to that, then it makes it easier, honestly, and it also puts you back in check. Like, you can't get out of this either, you know? There were some parent groups I tried to skip out on. I mean, it's during Monday Night Football. I mean,
come on!
I was having a rough week sometimes.
True.
And, you know, I almost felt like Bren sometimes, like, oh, I don't want to go, you know? But then I would get there, and it's just hearing everybody's, you know, like what's going on with everybody, it really reminds you, like, you are not alone, you know? And when I would hear things like, you know, if I were listening to this story on the radio right now, going back to before we were in treatment, I would be saying, you ain't met my kid.
My kid is different.
You don't know.
Right? Exactly.
You don't know what we're up against. But it's not true. You know, we met a lot of people that have it a lot worse, you know, and then, you know, as you're sharing, you bond with these people and then you can really help each other. I still speak to them. You know, I have friends from there we'll probably have for life. But yeah, you have to be willing to do it together. And one thing I had to tell myself, you know, after the fact was something I have to remember is sometimes I have to assume that I'm wrong. I can't always assume I'm right because, believe it or not, it's
not the case. And I feel a lot of parents are also describing to me, Amber, sort of with that comes sometimes a lot of guilt straight off the bat, right? So when you're starting opening up to the idea, hey, you know, maybe my approach wasn't perfect, or maybe I made some mistakes, or maybe I could have done, then this guilt sort of builds up. And it's important that you have an outlet, that you have a system, a support system, right? And an opportunity to work through some of that guilt so it doesn't become, you know, shaming and oh, I'm a bad mom, or oh, I'm a bad dad, and I made these poor choices. But rather a learning process, right, where you're getting some support through the system.
Yeah, it's also a lot different than just chatting with your girls or something like that, you know, because everybody probably has your best interest, wants the best for you, but they're not equipped either, you know. And so speaking in this group where the clinical director is there, she's driving the conversation in a healthy way. I don't know. I can't say enough good things. That's not why I'm here. But I'm just saying. It moved mountains for us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe what I should explain is that on Monday nights here in Santa Clarita is our big family night, we call it. So that means all the kids and all the parents are at the facility for 4 hours or so doing different types of things. And one of the things is parent group, where all the parents are sitting together and talking about things with our clinical director that most parents can sort of relate to, right? And you guys are working on some of the things. You are, you know, the clinical director would usually ask, so Amber, what are you working on? Right? You know, how are you managing your anxiety? Or what is your anxiety and what is actually Brendan's, you know, like trying to separate what we as parents come in with,
for
right?
sure.
What baggage we have, separate that from what the kids are presenting. And then we do a multifamily group where we try to create community because we think that it's so important that parents feel that they get a chance to meet and understand other parents, and that the kids obviously gets a community that they can relate to and find friends and stuff. So the way we do that is that parents are sitting in this big circle, and then there's a family in the middle, and we're doing a process with the family in the middle. It could be really scary, and isn't that right?
It's called the middle, right? I mean, when you get there, you're like, who is it gonna be?
Who's gonna get in the middle today? Who's gonna get fried today? That's true. But it is a process to create community, right? Because
it's really
it makes
therapeutic.
you feel. It's very therapeutic.
It probably gets people to open up more than they ever would in front of, you know, the group, or even to anyone else, and kind of really dig out some stuff that needs to come out. And then instead of having people, you know, just staring at you, judging you, you know, you have all these people who support you because their struggle is similar and they feel for you. Yeah.
Yep.
I went in there just like, my kid is bad, and I don't know what to do with him. And, you know, like I said, I learned along the way that I had a lot of work to do, but, like, I don't want to take away from Brendan, because he did so much work, honestly. And, you know, to talk a little bit about how our household was previously, it was chaos. I mean, it was screaming, yelling, throwing, slamming doors. And, you know, when I was a kid and I slammed my door, my dad took my door off. So I took his door off, you know? That just made him, like, further seclude himself, you know? It's not the right thing to do for him, right? No. And our kid is a runner. So when he would get upset, he would get on his horse, and he was fast. I mean,
you could not
you gotta get in the car to go get him. But that was, you know, things get overwhelming, and he would take off because he just needed to get away from the situation. And now, I mean, our house is peaceful, and our house is harmony. Yeah. You know, it's definitely not perfect, but it's nearly perfect. I'm not even gonna lie, you know, because the big thing is that we all kind of learned how to communicate with each other, you know, and that's a big deal. So, you know, I'm like a huge clown, and sometimes he doesn't want to be joked with, you know, and I need to respect that boundary, right?
Fair enough.
And he also, he keeps his areas clean now. He does his homework. He has A's and B's. He is in honors choir.
That's great.
He has friends.
Yeah.
Like, he is just thriving. So the difference, it's night and day, for real.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear,
Yeah.
of course. Tell me, so during treatment, when do you feel was sort of, or was there any sort of big moments? Like, typically the first 3 months, there's not a lot of progress, and then suddenly we see maybe after 3 to 4 months, that's typically when we start seeing, hey, now there's some sustainable differences happens or progress being made. What was your experience through? Did it come gradually, or did you have some big dips in the process where you felt, oh, this is hopeless, this is never going to work? What is your?
I did.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, the progress was gradual, but there was like big pitfalls in between.
Yes.
And it's because we were still hitting those buttons. I was still checking his assignments at school every day, and I had lovingly named myself Stepmomster to his teachers because they're like, this woman is all over
She's
this
on
kid.
it. Yeah.
So, I backed away from a lot of the discipline, and at the suggestion of his therapist,
Okay.
backed away from the discipline and just spent my time loving him, showing him that I'm on his side, and that I wasn't out to get him, which is now looking back, of course, how it seemed, because I was like, that's what I was doing, to be honest, like I would feel like maybe he was lying and I was trying to catch him in a lie. And like, I just, that one session just helped shift my focus to like where it needed to be.
Right.
And that was
Can I ask you, how long into the treatment was that?
I think it was like 4 months.
The reason why I'm asking, Amber, is because I feel that a lot of parents show up and they think, okay, you know what, we can do this for 2 months, right? And then he or she can go back to school, and he or she, well, you can be in school while you're in program, but then we can go back to normal. Like, this is going to take 2-3 months, then, and that's the usual time an IOP usually runs, right? But at Insight, we don't really believe in that. We believe it takes longer. So at Insight, typically, some families have been with us, as yourself, has been with us for a year before they graduate. Not doing 4 days a week, you step down, but the idea of it takes longer. And I like to hear that you say, hey, look, it took me 4 months to come to the realization that maybe something as simple as backing up a little bit was okay, and I could actually handle it, and I could actually do it without being too anxious about it, and allowing for life to take its course.
Yeah, I mean, it was very freeing for me to not have to, he would do something and I'd be like, oh, not my problem.
Yeah.
So you have to look at it like that, though. If you're changing something that you're so used to, you got to figure out how to convince yourself that you need to do the right thing,
Yeah.
But as you say that, so it took me 4 months maybe to kind of have that revelation. But I remember like at 6 or 7 months, we had like a huge blowout. And that was the moment we all were like, this isn't working.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
What are we
Is this
doing
all
here?
hopeless? Where are we going? Yep.
And just so people can hear, that blowout was so huge that it almost ended our marriage.
Wow.
So it was massive,
It was big.
right? And that really takes you back to think like, what is happening? We put in all this work. How come it's not fixed yet? But again, I think once we got over that, it was like we never looked back.
Okay.
It was almost like we had to have one last hurrah.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've had a disagreement since.
Let me ask you, why do you think you got over it? Was it other peers, other parents saying, hey, keep going at it?
I'll tell you, I'm glad you asked, actually. So I remember I was like, I'm done with Insight, just like a kid.
Yep. Fair. I've had enough.
Going.
No more family groups, no more. I'm done.
My husband, I'm done with you. Like, I myself have anxiety.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know until like my 40s, right? I just thought I was like a nervous wreck.
Yep.
And so it was starting to weigh on my mental health, And another piece of the puzzle is that, his biological mom was there as well. So, sometimes we get along great.
Of course.
Sometimes that's much.
Clearly.
So, that's throwing another something into the equation.
Yeah.
And I just like snapped, basically. I had enough. And Melanie said, "You may not quit. I will see you tomorrow."
Good. She believed in you.
Yeah, and so I went in because I have a lot of respect for them, and I didn't want to just flake. And they got me through it, They were still
Hold your
married.
hand.
Telling you.
Good.
Yeah. It's I don't know how that would turn out if you don't have help.
No, that's true.
Because you feel like hopeless and you don't have anywhere to go. So, yeah, I mean, they get you through the really tough times.
I'm glad to hear you describe how it's not all not all going the right way all the time, because I feel that's so rare, right? Treatment is usually about these dips, but the dips don't sometimes get as deep or as long as people bounce out of it, whether it's kids or parents bounce out of that dip a little bit quicker than they would in the past.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah. And when I see him now, just kind of like, you see things coming with your kids, right? Like, he's going to be super upset about that, right? Or, and just the way he reacts to things now that used to just send him into like a nuclear rage, He's like, it's fine. I don't really want to go anyway. Or, he has the skills now to just handle it and keep himself calm, and he knows he's doing better, and he's just like, he gained so much. But he worked for it. I mean, I told you he's a runner.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure one of the counselors chased him down from Insight at least 3 or 4 times.
Okay. Good. We've done that before. I'm glad they're out there. I'm glad Jermaine was running around there.
We should get you guys like a little golf cart.
Yeah, exactly. Pick up the kids. No, but again, when our emotional world blows up and it feels so unbearable in the moment, right? And you don't believe you can get through it. You run away, or you hide, or you get high, or you do whatever you need to do to just get through the next day, right? Until the next day. And I think back to the idea you said to me, I needed to learn to back off. And I think one of the big things parents need to learn is sort of that feeling of uncomfortableness and the fact that it's going to be okay. Like, as you said, I felt so uncomfortable when I'm not on top of him and I'm not monitoring. What if something goes wrong? What if something bad happened? What if I'm not in control? But sort of to understand, hey, look, that feeling is my own anxiety often, and it's okay. It's not going to kill me. It's not going to make me a good or bad mom or anything like that.
Right.
I just need to learn that's part of me.
Right.
And that's okay. Right?
Yeah. We all have to accept our stuff, And when you have a little education about it, it makes it a lot easier. It's not so scary.
True.
Yeah.
In a forum where you can actually listen, right? And where you feel that people around you are there to support you, and I think it's so important to feel comfortable in the environment that you're in.
Yes.
Otherwise, treatment is not going to have a big effect.
Absolutely not.
And I truly believe that peers have just as big as an impact as your therapist or your clinical director or the clinical team.
I agree.
I think peer support for the kids, but also for parents, is crucially important.
I mean, it was crucial in our journey, I have to say. Like I said, we had, there was times that moms called me crying or I called them crying. And, I'm not going to wake up a counselor in the middle of the night, but, we're up and we're texting and we're both in the struggle. So, it makes it so much easier because you just have a group of people that know exactly how you feel.
True.
And most of the time, people say, I know how you feel, and your first response is, no, you don't. But these people really do.
Because they've seen you out in the middle of the multifamily
I've been
group.
in the middle.
Exactly.
Y'all saw all my business.
Exactly. Well, we got to run into another little break here. So you're listening to KHTS 98.1 FM, and this is the Insight Teen Hour every Monday between 2 and 3 p.m. here on KHTS. So welcome back to the Insight Teen Hour. I'm Frederik from Insight Treatment Programs, and here in the studio I got Amber.
Hello.
Hello, welcome. Amber, so we were talking about, how is it to be a parent and be in treatment and sort of the journey you've been going through. But one of the things I wanted to come back to here in the last section of the program was how important it is for parents to be aligned. So a lot of parents that show up at treatment, they come from different family dynamics. They have different experiences in their lives. They have different parent styles, obviously, different things that they've been struggling with throughout their life, things that has worked for them that didn't work for the other. Bottom line is, very often we have to spend a lot of time and put in a lot of energy into making sure that parents are aligned. Because if they're not, the kids will often feel it. And they are very good at manipulating. They know exactly how to create drama around playing mom and dad out against each other and sort of diverting the conversation from some of the things they need to take ownership of to something else, right? And I usually say it's very important for the kids to feel that there are some healthy boundaries in the family. Because if you don't have boundaries, it's very hard to feel safe. And when you don't feel safe, it's very hard to feel loved. Mm-hmm. So I think a very important part to understand with teens is that holding boundaries is actually a very important way of showing that you love and care for your kid. And I very rarely have kids in the program who feels that mom and dad did not love them because they were setting boundaries. I usually have kids in the program who says mom and dad didn't love me because they didn't set any boundaries, and that they allowed for me to go on a rampage, and they allowed for me to do my thing instead of saying enough is enough. So back to the idea of how did you Amber, how did you navigate this? Because I know you and Patrick, you and your husband are sort of different, right? You have,
we have extremely different parenting styles.
There you go, right? Not uncommon. So why do you think it's important for you guys to align? How do you feel you did that? What was sort of the challenge?
So one of the hardest things to watch was Brendan thinking, that his dad was picking me over him. Mm-hmm. It's horrible to think that your child actually feels that way, right? Mm-hmm. And so many times Pat was just really stuck in the middle, and it was very hard because my parenting style is, like I said, I just took what my dad did and brought it along with me. And it's do as I say and do it now, and again, it's not like Bren wanted to be defiant. He just does not deal well with that kind of parenting. And on the other side of the coin, I felt like his dad was very lenient. He didn't have boundaries. He didn't have rules. He didn't have discipline that I thought, was necessary, let's say. And then we did have a little bit of a struggle, I'll say, when we started, implementing some of the things from Insight, even though we all sat down and agreed upon them, you forget about that when you start to enforce them. And Pat and I really had to stay strong and stay together, because the minute that your kid sees that there's a riff, it will be exploited 1,000,000%. And so we really worked together, and then we decided with Bren, let's, make rules for things that really are going to impact your life. So let's talk about your grades instead of your clothes being on the floor. Let's talk about your future instead of taking out the trash, And once we kind of aligned that way, we don't have to hold the boundary so much. I mean, he's just cruising along. He tests it every now and then, of course, but nothing like before. And it's not an argument, and it's not, a blow up. And Pat feels very comfortable now to tell him if he's done something wrong or if he needs to do something. We all were walking on eggshells, and now we got our tennis shoes on, and we're all good.
Well, Amber, unfortunately, the show is coming to an end here very soon. Time is flying. Thank you very, very much for coming in here and talking to about this. I think it is so important that parents are willing to stand up and say, yeah, you know what, this is my journey, and this is what we've been going through. Yeah,
if it helps anyone, then it was more than worth it, because I remember being that parent thinking, we have no more options, and I don't know what to do, and it's a terrible feeling.
It's a horrible feeling.
Yeah.
And I think there's nothing better than a parent that you sort of get to know that would then say, hey, look, don't give up. Like a peer turning that light on at the end of the tunnel is way more effective than a therapist or somebody who has a financial interest in you doing something.
Oh,
right?
for sure. Yeah.
So I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And all the best to your whole family.
Thank you so much.
And you're listening to KHTS 98.1 FM, and this is the Insight Teen Hour. Tune in next Monday at 2 p.m.